Hi there, and welcome to Pimp Your Science. Let's talk now about how to tell a stunning scientific story. You probably heard many times that when presenting your data, you should tell a story. You should invite your audience to a journey. But how exactly should you build a story, and what this story should look like? That's what we're going to find out here. Basic rule first. You have to say everything in the presentation 3 times so it sticks to the brain of your audience. So for example, in the first 3 minutes you're going to tell them the main message of your talk. Then you're going to tell the story in which you're again going to say the same message. And at the end you are going to summarize everything and again emphasize the main message. In that way it will stick in your audience brain. Build story backwards. So you know what your data look like before you start making presentations. You should already think about the main message of your data. And only after thinking what you're going to present, you should start building the evidence one by one. You should just follow the golden rules. The first golden rule that says, think about your audience. Not all data or not all evidence should be included in every single talk you have. In addition, you should avoid diluting the main story. Of course, on the path of your research, there is some interesting observations or nice to know knowledge that you collected, or some things that you also have followed. But leave that for some other time. You should concentrate on a single message. If you still want to present 2 stories, you should make a nice bridge between them. And you should explain the audience why. Why are you giving them the second story? It's much easier to remember one main message. Also, if you have a second story, the introduction to it, you will have only 1 minute to catch your audience attention. Unlike with the main story where you have 3 minutes. Now, when choosing which data to present to support your main message, you should be aware that you should choose the strongest data you have. You need to be aware of the fact that the single strong evidence has a much more value than 3 weak data points. And this is even worse if you present a preliminary data. Likewise, you should build your support logically. Sometimes historically equals logical presentation. However, sometimes the way you come to the result was not so straightforward, and you should not confuse your audience by explaining how some things did not work and led you to some other things. We know that science functions like that. So you should take your data and bring it in a logical structure function. It is very important when you present data sets that after each you make a pause and you explain what you just said and explain how that led to a next experiment. So you need to always give this rationale. In this pause, you will actually raise attention of your audience over and over again throughout your talk. Now, let's talk about what kills the great story. You don't want the face of your audience to look like this. First, overwhelming intro. If you show this figure in the first 3 minutes, forget it. Only your PI is probably listening. You can still convey this information if you want by animating it. For example, you can make a simple animation in which you lead your audience through a complex graph, step by step explaining each one and not giving them the overwhelming information at the beginning. You should also avoid useless and weak slides throughout your presentation. A slide like this, with a title outline, and then you just enumerate introduction, method, result, discussion section, is absolutely boring. And you don't want to appear as a boring person and your presentation is a weak one. So please avoid. Also, a lot of text is killing everybody. Who reads that? You have 30 seconds to read this. So please avoid text. Titles or headings are good, but the text in the presentation keep to minimum. Even worse is if you start reading that text as if nobody can read in the audience. Turning back to your audience to read or look at your slides is one more no-go, especially if you do it very often or for a long or prolonged period of time. We said that it's very important to maintain the eye contact with your audience at all time, and this is just the opposite. Also, using notes, that's good for learning, that's good for practicing. But if you have notes on your talk, people will think you're insecure. You don't know what you are talking about. And that's not good for a great story. Also, too much info on a slide, not only in introduction, but in any part of your talk, is just killing everybody. You don't need to present everything at the same time. Again, you can go stepwise. Not only too much data, but also unlabeled data is killing a story. While you are moving from panel to panel here, your audience is already forgetting what you have said. Of course, this example is very extreme, but it does happen when people just copy-paste the figures from their papers. Also, tables. For God's sake, to remove tables from your presentations. The worst is seeing something like that and then a speaker saying, as you can obviously see, child care is blah blah blah, and then they mark it. It's not obvious. Even if you have 2 rows and 2 columns, it will not be obvious. Make column bars. Equations are another potent killer of your audience. There is a simple rule, even applied in the mathematics and statistics, that each equation presented on a scientific talk will lead to 50% less audience listening. So if you want to present equations in your talk, you should think twice about that. Low resolution images? Yeah, you should do better. However, what's even worse is no resolution images. I was on so many talks where the speaker said, "Wow, I'm sorry, it just looks good on my screen." Wow, that's great, but you are there to convince your audience that your message holds true. And if they don't see evidence, they will just not believe it. And please avoid unnecessary animations. Something like that. Yeah, it may be cool, but it gets boring after a while, and it does distract from your main message. Putting movies in your presentations, please always check if they are working. The problem usually arises when you are making your presentation in a Mac and presenting it on a PC or vice versa. I was once on a talk where the presenter wanted to show us a video of a talking seal, and we were all excited. However, the video did not work, and the only thing I remember from that whole presentation is that the video did not work. When designing your slides, you should take care that the background is not distracting the audience from your data, your sentences, and whatever message you want to convey. So keep it simple. Also, if you have pictures that do not add to understanding of your data or your slide and are just that like a cosmetics, please remove them. They are just unnecessary distraction. Likewise, you should think what you are wearing on the day of your presentation. Without going into details of which style is good or bad, if your dressing style is distracting from what you are saying, please reconsider doing something a bit more modest. Also, while humor is good, too much jokes and funny comments during your presentations are killing the story. You don't want to appear as a clown in front of your audience. At the end, let's talk about enemy number 1 of any great presentation or any story, and that is a monotonous voice. I was on so many presentations where the speaker would start and finish his or her presentation without any change in his or her voice. Why on earth would Mother Nature give us such an instrument so you don't use it? You should use your voice to emphasize things which are important, to make breaks and pauses in thinking, to energize your audience. If you have a monotonous voice and you deliver your message in that fashion, then your message is actually not delivered. Think about that. Bottom line of that thing is that you need to put your time, heart, your soul into your story. You need to practice it. And once you are on the stage, you need to be Beyoncé or Pavarotti of science. And I promise, if you follow these tips and tricks and do's and don'ts, and if you follow the 3 golden rules, what you will have is a full audience attention and, of course, a proud supervisor. And that's great.